Come, let us follow the wisp light that calls, and lead us astray, out of the wood and into the wind. We had some time to kill between running errands one evening, so headed up to a high spot overlooking the forest while we waited. It was a couple of hours after sunset, and we hoped to see some wildlife that would normally get scared off during daylight. There were roadblocks on some of the lanes because of tree felling, so apart from us, the car park was completely deserted, and this viewpoint was just ours for tonight. It's next to an old holloway, a prehistoric trackway, and the area is littered with ancient burial mounds and the remains of occupation from the Iron Age, Roman and Saxon times. This place is old. We stopped the van and stepped out, taking in the view ahead of us. Grassy downland sloped gently towards the forest's edge at the bottom of the hill, where weak moonlight bounced off a layer of low-lying mist. Ahead, the whole woods was laid out for us to see, a large expanse of dark forest with jagged treetops visible against the slightly lighter skyline. My husband had brought a high-powered torch to shine into the edges of the woods to see if any eyes lit up from the wildlife. It's always amazing to shine a light into darkness and see the eyes of rabbits, deer, or hares shining back at you. Tonight, though, there was nothing, which is incredibly unusual. We could only hear distant tawny owls calling every now and again, and see the occasional silent, dark shape glide in front of us. The place felt a little uneasy, watchful. Nearby on my left, there was an occasional creak of something rubbing, like a hanging sign being swayed by the wind. We know that patch inside and out, and there's nothing there to make that noise. Besides, there wasn't even a breeze. My husband joked about it being a ghostly gibbet, and actually, that's exactly what it sounded like. There are often strange things in the woods. You sort of learn not to question it too much, and just accept things for what they are. I didn't really feel spooked, just a bit aware of it, particularly as the sound was centred at an ancient crossroads. Sitting in the van, we listened for sounds of wildlife. Even the owls had quietened, and everything became still. We sat in silence until, suddenly, a wind whipped up from behind us from out of nowhere through the trees. As soon as it had started, it was gone. It felt odd, like something passing through, then back to quiet. With our eyes tuned into the dark, we sat looking over the woodland. There was a strange noise to the right, like an animal calling, but nothing recognisable. The sound was followed by snapping branches. We know most woodland animal calls, but have no idea what this was, so we just kept cool about that too. Yes, we said. Probably just some kind of owl. My husband shone his torch in the direction of the sounds, only for it to go dead straight away. It had had brand new batteries that evening, and had been working perfectly when we first arrived. It's never failed before, or since for that matter, so the odd feeling stayed. There were a couple of dim lights on the horizon in the distance, and over to the right was a tiny section of faraway road, with occasional glimpses of tiny headlights, or the red of taillights briefly showing. The main view ahead was literally just darkness. As we stared into the blackness, a small light came into view near the treetops. It looked reminiscent of a glowworm, or an ember from a fire that persists into the night sky, only brighter. It moved in one direction, kind of higgledy-piggledy, and made its way slowly, but with purpose. It started from nowhere in the woods, just appeared on the left within our field of view, and slowly moved to the right. Strangely, it appeared to be broadly following the route of an old trackway, which only exists today in disjointed fragments of paths and telltale lines of trees marching through modern-day fields. The light followed the route smoothly for a while, and then stopped. When it stopped, it seemed to glow brighter. It was unusual because it was constant and unobscured, not broken like it would be if it was carried by a walker, but high up like it was floating just above the treetops. The way it stayed constant made it seem certain it was a lot higher than the paths in the woods, or it would have been obscured by the trees. This was bright and close. It was within the area of the woodland, but not on the ground. It was staying in one spot now. As I stared at it, I began to realise that it looked as if it was moving in a different way, swaying. I doubted myself at first because there were so few points of reference against the blank black canvas of the trees. Were my eyes playing tricks? I looked at it a little closer. Minutes passed. No doubt about it, it was swaying. I saw my husband reach for his glasses. I knew he was watching it too. We looked at each other. That's a bit weird. The movements looked strange, and I began to wonder more about the source of it, running through possibilities in my mind. I dismissed it being attached to a building, and besides, in that direction, there were only farms, and much further away, and on much lower ground. This was high, pretty much at the same level as us, parked up on the hill. Could it be a person carrying a torch? No. It simply wasn't moving the right way, and besides, it was unwaveringly pointing towards us. It didn't change angle, or dim. It just didn't fit. As we stared at it, it continued swaying from left to right to left to right, like a pendulum, rhythmic. It made no sense. Although the light looked very powerful, it wasn't illuminating anything at all. It itself was highly visible and impossible to miss, but it wasn't illuminating any branches surrounding it, a trunk below it, or any other trees around it. There was nothing showing but the light itself. It was a light that drew you in because it couldn't be explained away. Mesmerizing. We both know these woods really well. At all times of the day and night, on the pass and further off track, we know the terrain and the tall trees, Douglas firs, Scots pine, beech and oaks. Even during the winter, the path can't be seen from where we were, but the treetops can. This light was definitely at tree canopy height. As time went on, nothing changed. We watched it for nearly half an hour. The light just continued to sway and shine unabated until, eventually, time dictated that we needed to get back on our way. My husband switched on the engine, and almost instantly, the light was extinguished. There was no dimming, no hesitation. It was simply on, and then it was off. Bizarre. It was as if the connection had been severed, and the moment was over. We drove down the lane to the far end, following the edge of the woodland for nearly a mile, then turned round and drove back past where we'd been parked, and on towards our destination. As we passed the trees, we looked for the light, but there was simply nothing at all. The phenomenon described in this fascinating and atmospheric account is most commonly referred to as the Will O The Wisp, although there are upwards of 100 names for it in the UK alone. The Will O The Wisp is a mysterious ghost light which has been sighted floating above marshland, fens and bogs since at least the 14th century, leading unsuspecting travellers astray. In 1340, Welsh poet Dafydd ap Gwilym made the first known reference to the phenomenon with the term Cannwyll Corph, candle corpse in English. This name indicates one of the very popular folkloric explanations for the light, that it is the soul of the deceased carrying a lantern. The term jack-o'-lantern, which in contemporary times is associated with the Halloween tradition of pumpkin carving, is often conflated with the Will O The Wisp in explanations of its origin. In some Irish traditions, Stingy Jack is a cruel, mean-spirited individual who has alienated all of his friends. He begins drinking with the devil, eventually convincing him into attaining a longer life. When the inevitable happens, and Jack does die, he is rejected from both heaven and hell. As a result, he is left to wander the earth eternally, with only a burning lump of coal in a turnip to light his way. So, what about the name Will O The Wisp itself? As it turns out, it can trace its origins to a very similar legend. In one version from Shropshire, Will is a sinful and corrupt blacksmith. St. Peter gives him a second chance at life, but rather than savouring this opportunity, Will squanders it, committing such horrific debauchery that both heaven and hell deny him entry. Other folkloric explanations frame the floating fireball itself as the supernatural entity, a mischievous or malevolent spirit which leads a wanderer into dangerous swampland. Further variations even cross over into fairy lore, suggesting that the lights are produced by fairies, or are the fae themselves. Not all stories about these lights depict them in a negative manner. In some cultures, the flames are referred to as treasure lights and supposedly guide the follower to great riches. This particular version is mentioned in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Despite the vast variation in both the naming and narrative surrounding the Will O The Wisp, there is solid consistency in the eyewitness testimony of these fireballs. This suggests that there is a tangible phenomenon at play here. And indeed, science has had a compelling explanation for them since at least the 19th century. The most widely accepted answer is that they're the product of ignited marsh gas, most likely slowly leaking methane whose ignition is triggered by phosphine. This would explain why they usually appear over wetlands, float about human height off the ground, and seemingly ignite spontaneously. Historical and contemporary accounts of these lights, however, often conflict with this explanation. In many eyewitness accounts, including the one at the start of this video, the lights are often seen to move over long distances, remain glowing for long periods of time, and don't emit heat at all. Unfortunately, the scientific community has largely stopped investigating this phenomenon, settling for the combusting methane gas as an explanation for all cases. While it's certainly a robust theory for some, if not most of the sightings, I feel that there may be a piece of the puzzle missing. Although not all the blame rests on scientists, a primary reason for why lambent flames are no longer actively researched may be that sightings appeared to fizzle out in the 20th century. There have been very few reports of the Will O The Wisp in contemporary times. It has been suggested that this is because most humans no longer traverse remote bogs and marshes due to modern transport. Trains, cars and buses have removed the need for anyone to risk their own safety in these treacherous landscapes. Further, many large marshes and swamps have been filled in for use in agriculture or to build infrastructure. There is very little use for such terrain in a capitalist society. The Will O The Wisp stands as just one of many rich historical folk legends which is slowly being eroded by our increasingly connected and artificial world. We no longer pay attention to the tangible land we inhabit. We flatten and destroy the natural world to construct money-making enterprises, and we lose something. Perhaps there really is something more to these ghostly glowing orbs, something beyond atmospheric phenomenon, something inexplicable. In a culture in which the landscape is not valued unless it can produce wealth, we are unlikely to ever know. The Will O The Wisp survives in bygone tales relayed by people who were in touch with their world. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.